So a very big welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for our event, which is The Kindness of Strangers, and with our guest speaker, Dan Martin. Welcome, Dan, and thanks so much for supporting our festival by sharing your experiences through your talk. I'll come back to Dan shortly, and I'll give him a fuller introduction just before he begins his talk. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jane Andre. I'm a member of the local Stamford and Rutland Amnesty group who are organising this event this afternoon. And we also have Harriet Wills from our group who is providing background tech support. Many thanks, Harriet. So thanks to you all for taking time out to join us this afternoon. It's great to have you here rather than the myriad other things that you could have been doing. So thanks for supporting our group. And supporting Dan in his talk. That's really lovely. And just to let you know that this afternoon's event is part of the Amnesty International Central England Festival of Social Justice, which has involved some 50+ free online events that have been taking place from the 16th of April, and they go on until the 31st of May. The Festival of Social Justice has brought together around 40 local amnesty groups in the central England region, together with an amazing community of organisations and individuals like Dan, who are all working together to help spread the word about social justice and human rights and to encourage people to take action. So I'm just going to run through a few bits of housekeeping. Start off with, and then after that I'll introduce you to Dan in a bit more detail and hand over to him to take you through his experiences of the kindness of strangers. And then after Dan's talk, there's the opportunity for you to ask him some questions. So just the housekeeping, if anybody at any point finds their connection is lost, please try close down and come back through the same link in the email that was sent to you. And we really hope that that will solve any issues. In terms of ground rules, there's the opportunity for you to ask some questions after the main part of Dan's talk. And to do this, we're using the virtual hand raise function, which you'll find in the reactions menu that runs along the bottom of the Zoom screen. So please use that if you wish to ask a question, and just remember to unmute yourself before asking it. And then to mute yourself again straight afterwards. And also don't forget to switch off your virtual hand raised icon afterwards, otherwise we might get a bit confused. And obviously we'll try and respond to as many questions in the time that we have available. So there we go. And the last one is, just to say that we'd like everyone to feel that they're in a safe space, a safe and supportive space this afternoon, and we support freedom of expression that demonstrates respect to everyone. So in your questions and any comments, please be respectful of others. Okay, so thanks for listening to all that, and without any more delay, I am delighted to start the event proper and introduce you to Dan. So Dan is one of Stamford's many global citizens. He's undertaken 3 epic cycle tours, some 50,000 miles, and he's travelled to 143 countries. He's also worked with refugees in both Calais and Greece. I could say a lot more, but I'm going to leave that to Dan to tell his own story, and I'll come back in again at question time. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Jane. I will be talking plenty. So welcome everybody. Nice to see some friendly faces. Some people from my past, good to see. I'm going to talk a little bit. The first bit of my talk is going to be about the cycling part of my trips, and then the second bit is going to be about Calais and Greece and the refugees. So if you like cycling, the first bit's for you, and if you like refugees, the second bit's for you. But if you want to stay for all of it, more than welcome. I did my 3 bike rides. I've got a convenient map on the wall behind me. First one was from London to Cape Town, down the east coast of Africa. The second one was from South Korea to Cape Town, through Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq and North Korea, down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. And the third one was from Saudi Arabia, through Yemen and Somalia, through Central Africa to Johannesburg. So that's my 3 trips, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of the hottest places I've been to and the coldest places I've been to, and how cycling allows you to get a real access into some of these communities, and then I'll talk a bit about the refugee work and the Kindness to Strangers talks that we did. If I can share my screen. Yeah. Can you see that? Is this going to work? Talk amongst yourselves while my slow computer. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about cycling where you're not supposed to go, and how just everywhere I've been in these supposedly more dangerous countries, I've been just super friendly. I should apologise a bit. I've been on holiday for the last 6 weeks in Congo and Kenya, so I'm a bit unkempt. I've just had quarantine here, so I haven't been able to get to the hairdressers. But you're lucky in that sometimes I look a bit like this. As you can see, some kind of exemplary tan lines there. It looks a bit like I'm wearing a t-shirt that's got nipples on it. So yeah, sometimes I look like that. You're lucky. Sometimes I look like this. This was after I've been cycling through Ghana, I think, and I've been going for maybe 12 or 13 months, and my hair was just enormous. So I took it off and looked like a crazy person. Sometimes I look like this. This is me at 150 kilograms when I was trying to do my big swim. That's me on the left, by the way. And then sometimes I look like this. And again, that's me on the left there. So yeah, you're lucky. I'm relatively kempt today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these 3 trips. This is the Career to Cape Town one, which was the Axis of Evil. So I want to talk about the coldest place I've been to and the hottest places I've been to. When I went through Tibet, now Tibet, I imagined it to be kind of mountainous all the way through, but it's kind of like a plateau up at 4,000 meters. And the problem with that is that there's half of the oxygen pressure that we have down at sea level, so it's just bitterly cold the whole time. And I'd planned is probably the wrong term, but on most of my trips I go to the different areas at the wrong time. So I was in Tibet in the winter, I was in the Sahara in the summer, I was in West Africa in the rainy season. Yeah, kind of messed up those timings. But yeah, I remember one time cycling across Tibet, and it had just been bitterly cold, and I'd try and have one of my breaks, and I just remember lying like beside my bike trying to get out the wind, and just it being really, horribly cold. But I'd had this genius idea that in Beijing I bought these 4 beers, and I was going to have one beer, my favourite beer actually, Old Speckled Hen, one of the beers at every pass. So there's one pass that's like 4,600 meters, one that's 4,800, one that's 5,200, and then one that's 5,600, I think. But anyway, so when I was doing the smaller ones, they were fine. I'd get up there, I'd have my beer, I'd feel like a champion, and wobbly cycle down the other side of the hill. But the one time when I got to the highest one, at 5,400 meters, I think it was minus 26 overnight. I'd camped about 200 meters below the top. I was just bitterly cold, and also like your brain is a bit fuzzy when it's low on oxygen. So I'd cycled up there, got up there about 6 o'clock in the morning, just as the sun was coming up, and I took my beer. It had been in my pocket. Took my beer out of my pocket and opened it, and because it had been in my pocket, it had shaken all over the place and started spilling. So I put it quickly in my mouth, didn't want to waste any, and then as I put it on my mouth, the metal froze to my lip, and then as I pulled it off there, a bit of my lip came off and was on the beer can instead of being on my lip. So I was sitting there on my own, kind of covered in beer and blood, and I thought, God, this is a stupid idea. But the actual coldest night I've ever had was in Uzbekistan. And minus 14 doesn't sound as cold as minus 26, but this was in Uzbekistan, and I was quite naive at the time, and I'd seen deserts and all these kind of things, and I thought, well, I won't need any of my warm stuff. So when I got out of Afghanistan, I sent all my warm clothes home, all of my warm sleeping bag, and I just had kind of waterproofs and tracksuit bottoms, and I lay on this kind of mud earth bed, and I remember like trying to stay awake because I thought I was gonna freeze. And I thought I got up about 3 o'clock in the morning and took this photo, and I thought I'm going to remember this as take this photo to memorialize how cold I was on that day and that I survived. And now I look at the photo, I realize that there's a fridge in this cold room. So maybe I'm just being a bit soft. So yeah, the hottest places I've been to, on my first bike ride, this was going through Jordan, and I made some pretty schoolboy errors on my bike front, in that I didn't really know anything about fixing bikes or bikes in general. So it turned out, as I was going through this really hot middle of the day sun, I'd get punctures every other day at about 1 or 2 o'clock, and I'd end up trying to change them, and the sweat would be dripping in my eyes. And the problem was I hadn't put any rim tape. If they don't know anything about cycling, I hadn't put any rim tape on the rims, and as soon as I got that in, I didn't have any more punctures again until I got to Cape Town. So yeah, again, maybe it's just me being foolish. So yeah, the second hottest time I had was in going through northern Sudan, and this is from kind of Wadi Halfa down towards Khartoum, and it's just really kind of horribly corrugated sandy roads like this, and as you can see, there's just no shade. So when all my bike rides, I'd be quite militant about doing, kind of waking up at 5:30 in the morning and cycling 6 to 8 and having 20 minutes break, and then trying to do 2 hours and 20 minutes break. But when you're having 20 minutes break in here and there's just no shelter and it's just like bakingly hot, and you might notice I've got a bit of a ginger beard, so we're not too good in the sun. So that wasn't much fun. But there was time when I was cycling through this area, and when it's kind of rocky like it is in this photo, the road comes to like one road, but when it goes out into the desert bit, it just splits into kind of 100 different roads, and they all go out, and then they'll come back in later. And I was in the middle of one of these large kind of desert plainy bits, and this sandstorm blew through, and I had to stop, couldn't see where I was going, and I had to sit it out for 2 or 3 hours. And then as it blew through, when it stopped, I realised that it'd blown all the tracks away, and I couldn't see where I was going. So I cycled on for a bit, and a lot of these times on the bike rides, things just get into your head, and that's the hardest part. So I thought, well, I've lost my way, and I've run out of water, and that's it. I'm gonna die or whatever. And I remember stopping on this sand dune and just being properly like having a bit of a mope and being miserable at myself. And I looked to my right, and I saw in the sand dune just a tap sticking out the sand dune, and I thought, that's it. I've gone crazy. I'm breaking up. I'm getting heat stroke. So I went over to the tap, and I turned the tap on, and water came out, and I filled up my water and drank out of it. And then I went over this dune, and this dune was only like 2 or 3 meters, so I should have just looked over it. But went over the dune, and that was the Nile there, and there was a village, and the sand dune had just gone across one of the fields, and so I was all right after that. But the hottest, I'm just going to check the participant list because, okay. So the hottest, how do I get back on that? The hottest place I've ever cycled was in Mauritania, and they have this beautiful like tarmac road there, but it kind of radiates the heat back off, and it's just super, super hot. And about every 20 kilometers, there's a Bedouin tent, and people pull in there, and you stop for when it's hot, and you can have warm tea and warm Coke, and just get out the heat for a bit. So I did this most days, and then this one particular day, I left my bike outside, and I didn't think about it not being in the shade. So I left it outside, had 2-3 hours sleeping there. When I came back out, my saddle is black, and it just got so hot that the 4 metal rivets on the back of the saddle had super heated up. And when I sat down on it, it melted through my shorts and caused these 4 big boils across my bum. And I named him after my old PE teacher, Kev. Yeah, which I was just checking to see if he's not one of the participants, but he was a pain in the bum, so he got that name. So talking about this cycling is just a wonderful way of getting around. I'm not a big fan of cycling. Like, it hurts my bum, hurts my back. Don't really like it. But as a speed, it's brilliant. Kind of going 10-12 miles an hour is the perfect pace for getting through a country and still being able to see it. And also, it's a perfect kind of disarmer, almost makes you a bit more vulnerable when you come into a village. And normally when I'm cycling into a village, there's other people that are cycling around at that time, and you kind of join up in a little mini peloton with them, and you've already got cycling friends when you get into the village. But it also allows you to do some pretty cool stuff. So for example, we met these bomb disposal guys who were traveling down from the UK to Guinea-Bissau, and they said, when you get down to Bissau, you have to come see us. And the night before, we went out in Bissau and tried to rid the world of this horrible beer called Superbock, which is terrible, and we did a good job of trying to drink all of that. And the next morning, we got a knock on the door at 7 o'clock, and it was the day we were going to go and do bomb disposal. And I don't know if you can see in this photo, but down the bottom, can you see my cursor? Down the bottom here, these are like 250 kilogram bombs. These are 50 or so. There's some RPGs, and they're all just in a pit in the middle of the city. So if you go kind of 200 meters that way, it's the central bank of Bissau, and if you go about 300 meters that way, it's the bus station for Bissau. So this is properly just in the middle. And what happened is that when there was the war with the Portuguese just left, and these were all left abandoned. And as the price of copper and aluminium went up and down, people started trying to take the firing pins out of these bombs and selling them. So they all got collated in here, and we put them into the back of some trucks and drove them out to the middle of the desert. And when we were driving out there, the TNT was underneath my seat, and the Russian guy who was with me, he said that the TNT was made in 1946, and he said sometimes it goes boom, sometimes it doesn't. So that was an interesting car journey. We took it out there and blew them up. I went, kind of one of the specific things on my trips, definitely my second and third trip, is that on my first trip, when I went through Syria and Sudan, everyone had told me how dangerous Syria was in kind of 2004, so it was before the war. But people had told me, it's a militant regime in Syria, and you'll be killed for wearing shorts, and they'll follow you. And Osama bin Laden was in Sudan when I was in Sudan, and they were like, yeah, you're going to get taken and kidnapped and beheaded and stuff. And turns out that the people in Syria and people in Sudan were the most friendly people that I've met on my entire trip, to the extent that in Sudan, I think I was there for about 13, 14 days, and I spent $19, just because everywhere I went, I was welcomed into people's houses. Even in shops and restaurants, I wasn't allowed to pay. I had a couple of occasions in northern Sudan when I just thought, this is ridiculous. So if I was buying a Coke or something, I'd just leave the money and then run away. And I had like these angry shopkeepers running after me, saying that they didn't want my money and that I was a guest, and it was their hospitality. So just amazing. So my second and third trips, it was definitely my second trip. It was Korea to Cape Town via the Axis of Evil. So to try and find these places that people kind of perceived as terrible and dangerous and whatever, and just hope that people thought about fat bloke from Peterborough cycling through it before they thought about kind of war and stuff like that. So went to Iraq, and this was kind of in northern Iraq, in Kurdistan, in Mosul, and this guy was the one guy guarding this 3,000-year-old citadel. And the one thing I noticed from Iraq, and this citadel in particular, was that there's a real differentiation in most of these countries between the people and the politics. So they despised the politics. They hated Tony Blair and hated George Bush, but they loved the people and loved Manchester United. And this citadel here, which is 3,000 years old, had loads of 50-cent graffiti written over it. So it was interesting. Iran was also just a brilliantly friendly place. It kind of got to the stage in Iran where it was just too hospitable, so I would just be tired and want to kind of go and be on my own. But no, people wanted to come over and chat and ask how I was and see if they could do anything for me. So I got this real kind of pretty pretentious hospitality fatigue of people being too nice to me. But then again, also in the same place you'd have pictures like this were pretty common, where they down with the USA. But again, it's kind of split between politics and people. I went to North Korea at the beginning of my trip. I went on an organised tour, which was just kind of one of the most fascinating places I've ever been. A real eye-opener, kind of. It's very difficult to explain the kind of brainwashing or whatever's gone on over there. But I lived in South Korea for a year, and when you go to the demilitarized zone, it feels a lot more kind of propaganda. You have to wear a suit because otherwise they say the North Koreans will take photos of you and they'll say, oh, look at these Westerners, they're very poor, they've got ripped jeans or stuff like that. And there was the American soldiers on the South Korean soldiers on their side were these big 6-foot muscly guys, and the North Koreans were not. But when we went from the North Korean side, there was no South Korean soldiers at all. We could wander around anywhere. You could wear whatever clothes you wanted to. And just outside the DMZ, I came across these guys playing volleyball. People from North Korea, people from Korea in general, not very tall, and I'm quite tall. I'm 6'5". So this guy here, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, but this guy here, he had a terrible day. I mean, I was just smashing on him all day, so I don't know what happened to him in the end, but yeah, I had a brilliant game. Probably the best game of volleyball I've ever played. Yeah. North Korea is brilliant. On these trips, probably Congo is probably my favourite country, and Congo is a fascinating place. I ended up doing my dissertation on it at my master's, and yeah, it's fascinating in that like it's kind of got everything going for it in that it's got this incredible river, it's got this incredible resources, and it's fertile land, and yet it's the poorest place I think arguably the poorest place in Africa, and definitely one of the most war torn. And everywhere you go, there's everything wants to kill you. I mean, there's a lake called Lake Kivu where it's got dissolved methane and dissolved carbon dioxide in it. And if there's any kind of mixing, if there's an earthquake or whatever, then that might dissolve out and that might kill you. And then it's some of the most active volcanoes in the world, and it's got the fastest flowing lava in the world. And then there's 120 rebel groups there. But then when you travel through it and you travel with the people that live there, I mean, it's just this, I don't know whether it's related, but this kind of like aliveness, this sense of like enjoyment of enjoying the life that they've got is just, I mean, contagious. And it's my favourite country. I've just been back there again now. But when I was there last time, I went to see the mountain gorillas, and it's quite a fascinating place. And I think I turned up, and the guys the day before me had told me like, oh, you had to walk for like 10 hours to find these gorillas. So I set off hiking with my guide, and within about 20 minutes, the guide kind of almost like ran into my guide, and he was like, "You're in the presence of the gorillas." And even back then, you had to wear a mask because we can share diseases with them. They were especially worried about TB. But anyway, so the rules were you're only allowed to go 5 meters away from the gorillas, which is fine because gorillas are scary and I don't want to go anywhere near them. So there was a female gorilla lying on the floor, and I was about 5 meters away, and I was taking my photos and whatever. And then she rolled over, and she was about 3 meters away from me. And I thought, well, the guide said, "Oh, because they've come towards you, like that's fine, but you can't go towards them." So I was still taking photos, and then just out of the corner of my eye, I saw this thing move, and this tree starts shaking, and you hear this noise like this. I mean, a noise I can't even describe really. And this silverback gorilla charges at me, and I feel like he comes to about this close, but he's probably, I don't know, but he's 170 kilograms, and he's angry, and he's ripping at the ground. And I feel like he was there for about 10 minutes, but it was probably 10 or 15 seconds. And then he, anyway, he charges at me, and the rule is apparently you're not meant to run away, because if you run away, they chase you and will tear you to pieces. You just have to kind of stand there. So I just stood there, and I looked down at my guide, and my guide looks up to me, and he goes, "Be brave." And I thought, you be brave. You've got a gun. This is your job. But anyway, the gorilla kind of eventually backed down, and then slowly like reversed over to his female, and started mating with the female. So I don't know whether, but maybe I'm sexually threatening to silverback gorillas. That's the myth of that story. When I was in Congo on the other side, I was down there with a friend of mine, Todd, and we were by the river, and this guy said, "Oh, do you want to come swim through the rapids?" And I thought, "God, yeah, I quite like swimming. I'll swim through the rapids." And I said, "But is there not crocodiles in the rapids?" And he said, "Nah, they don't like the rapids. They stay upstream and they stay downstream, but they don't like the rapids." So I was like, fine. We got in there. We didn't go in through the big ones, but we kind of stayed on the side, and it was brilliant fun for kind of 3 or 4 minutes. And then just as I was getting out downstream, a crocodile didn't touch my leg, but it was about 2 or 3 meters away downstream, and scared the living lights out of me. But just kind of goes to show, don't always believe what people tell you. I went through Afghanistan. This was in 2008, Christmas time in 2008, and this is me looking all jihadi chic. Just a really fascinating country again. It was kind of middle of the war, so there's a lot of suspicion towards foreigners, and yet still, when I cycled north out of Kabul over the Salang Pass, there's only one hotel there, and I stayed in there, and then within kind of a few hours of being there, the English teacher was brought down. And actually, when I got there, the joke by the local lorry drivers who were staying there, they'd all come over to me, and they'd point at one of their friends, and they'd go, "Taliban," and they'd point at one of their friends, and that was a big joke to them. Wasn't a big joke to me. But when the English teacher turned up, I was like, these guys are saying that they're Taliban. And he said, of course, we were all Taliban when we had to be, and now we're not. So, so shared a great meal with them. And the next day, came into a town called Bulikomri, just outside Mazar al-Sharif, and there was a wedding on at the hotel, and it was a wedding between a family that lives in Leeds and a family that lives in East London, so got welcomed in there as a guest of honour, even though I was a dirty, smelly cyclist. But yeah, really, really fascinating place. When I was in Kabul, that's what this weird photo is on the right here. It was Burns night, and there'd been an attack a couple of days before, so all of my friends who were journalists and working in refugee work over there, they couldn't go out into the market to get the food, so I had to go down there, and I was the only kind of tourist there, and I was trying to mime like sheep and sheep's stomach and being like bear, and then like rubbing my stomach, and they're like, yes, sheep is delicious, and I'm like, no, I need you to give me the stomach, and I'm going to put the lungs inside the stomach, and then yeah, so yeah, they thought I was a crazy person. Cool. Afghanistan. Yeah, as I went further north, I mean, it got freezing cold, and as you can see, like it kind of freezes on your mustache and on your eyelashes and all that kind of stuff. And as it freezes, it kind of contracts and starts pulling your hair slowly out. So if you move your face, yeah, it's agony. There's still quite a lot of remnants of the Soviet invasion. These are all Soviet tanks. These were all guarded when I was going through. And when I got up to Mazar al-Sharif, the big game in Afghanistan is this game, I've forgotten the name of it now, Buzkashi. It's called Buzkashi, and it's basically like rugby but on horseback. And they thought, oh, you've been cycling all this time, you'll be all right on a horse. And turns out I'm terrible on a horse, can't ride a horse at all. And I got bullied by children and bullied by everyone there and pushed off my horse lots of times. So it was good fun though. Afghanistan, yeah, Saudi Arabia, that's actually where I'm at the moment, teaching English. When I got to Saudi Arabia after my second bike ride to try and pay off some debts, I had it in my head that I didn't really know kind of which direction to go, so I wanted to go through the empty quarter, and I thought, this empty quarter should be empty, right? It should be sand and whatever forever, and it would be really difficult to get across. So I bought this bike, especially with the big fat wheels to go over the sand, and I put kind of 20 litres of water in the back, and I set off, and I thought it was going to take me about 2 weeks. So I was going to have, kind of like less than 1.5 litres, 2 litres of water a day, and I might get in a bit of trouble, but it's adventure. And so I set off, and then on the first night, I got welcomed into a Bedouin camp. On the second night, there were some Indian Pakistani guys doing some work on the oil roads there, and I stayed with them, and just every night became kind of this farce of ridiculous hospitality, going through this empty quarter, and I ended up being kind of fatter and more hydrated than at the end than I was at the beginning. So really really interesting how when you go to kind of physically hard places, how people are just ridiculously friendly. Yeah, I'll tell you a bit about the rest of that trip in the next one. Yeah, so I went to Mogadishu in Somalia, and all my friends had been like, like as soon as you get over there, I think it was just when Captain Phillips, the movie, had come out, so they were like telling me how I'm going to be kidnapped and whatever. So as soon as I got to Mogadishu, I decided to get on a boat and head out into the sea. And yeah, it turns out there wasn't too many pirates and stuff there. But this is the kind of signs you have outside the restaurants there, so it's still kind of very, very fresh. I'm not sure whether I've got a Yemen one coming up. Okay, let me look. Yeah, this is in South Sudan. South Sudan was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, in that it's the only place where I've cycled up and back the same road. And normally I come to a checkpoint, and a lot of countries, they kind of want to get some money out of you or some bribery and stuff. So I normally cycle up to them slowly and then speed up and just go through. And they sometimes hit me with sticks and whatever, but I get through. And I always figure if it's a real problem, they'll come after me. But so South Sudan, I did that, and I went through all these checkpoints, about 20 checkpoints in 100 kilometers, and was fine, got through it, and then had a great time up in Juba. But when I was coming back the other way, every checkpoint stopped me, and they stopped me for like 2 or 3 hours, and they were like, oh, it's it's illegal what you've done, and you're going to go to jail, and we'll have to do this, and then after 2 or 3 hours, it'll come out that there's an official fee I can pay. Which I never did. I was quite lucky. I never paid any bribes on any of my trips. So I'd be like, no, I'm not going to pay that. And they're like, well, you have to wait for the judge. And I was like, oh, okay, let's wait here. Can I stay here? Can I have some of your food? And then after a few hours they just found me annoying and got rid of me. But this was up in Juba, this bit here, and I thought I just wanted to go swim in the Nile. I thought it'd be a cool thing to do, and I spoke to these guys and I said, look, is it safe to swim in here? And they said, yeah, no problem. And I said, there's no crocodiles here, and they were like, no crocodiles here. So I went in, swam for like 4 or 5 minutes, and got scared and got out. And I said to the guys, why don't you swim in the river? And they were like, because there's crocodiles in there. So turns out they were just lying to me. Cool. This was when I went through Yemen on my third trip. I went through Saudi Arabia, tried to cross the Yemeni border, which was not a good idea, and then flew into Sana'a, and then cycled down to Hodeida, and then a place called Mocha, which is this one on the right here, which is where the Mocha coffee came from. It was a big coffee merchant hub back in the day, but now it's very kind of run down. And one of the main activities they do in Yemen, one of their favourite things is this gap, which they get this leaf and they put it all in their cheek and chew it up, and it kind of bulges out in their cheek, and it's kind of mildly hallucinogenic. So at the beginning of the day, people are quite sharp and on it, and by the end of the day, they're a little bit more off it. So one of the things I try and do on most of my countryside visits, I try and get a shave or something. My tip for having a shave in Yemen is to get it done in the morning. This guy, his eyes were a bit blurry, nicked me a few times, so it was, probably get it done in the morning. When I got to Mocha, I had to get a boat across to Djibouti, and again, this is the kind of pirated waters and whatever, and I was quite nervous about it, so I wanted to play some music while we were going across. There's about 80 of us on this boat, so I put my headphones in, and then all of my music just deleted off my phone. So the only one I had on there was the Frozen soundtrack. So I was going across this pirate waters, listening to Let It Go and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite a surreal moment. And then when we got to Djibouti, I said to the guy who was driving us across, I said, where do I go to get my passport stamped? And he said, we just paid this guy $50 and he lets us through the fence. So the official kind of passport entry into Djibouti was missed. Cool. Okay, so basically the things that I've learned from my bike rides was that people as a race of human beings are nice. They want to help. They're looking for opportunities to help, and they're fantastically hospitable at pretty much every opportunity. And that the kind of it's difficult to it's easy when you live in the UK and that kind of other people to be like, they're like that and they do this, and people from Saudi Arabia are all like this, and people from Somalia are all like that. But when you've actually been there, you can't other them anymore. Like, it is just us. So that's the kind of real big message I got from my trip. If you don't go, then you don't know. So I do think that traveling to these places is really essential. So basically, when I got to Djibouti, I was staying with these guys I'd met, French guys, and they lived in Calais. So when I got back to the UK, they said, come down to Calais, and I went down and visited them, and they said, do you want to come to the camp? So I went down to the camp, and the first 10 people I've met were Sudanese and Afghans and Syrians, and not only had I been to their country, but most of them I'd been to their town or their village, and one guy I'd stayed in his brother's hotel. And yet, my kind of impression of all of the countries where they came from, that had been this overwhelming hospitality, where they've really welcomed me in and gone out of their way to help me fix a bike tire or help me find a place to stay or find an internet cafe, and really worked hard to help me. And yet they've come to my house, to Europe, to where I live, and we make them sleep in a puddle outside in the rain. So it really kind of moved me, the time there. So me and a friend of mine, Fergal O'Nulahan, who's also a kind of adventure cyclist, decided to start this series of talks called The Kindness of Strangers. And we'd get adventurers like we'd have Ed Stafford and Bear Grylls and that come down, and they talk kind of 10 minutes about their trip, and then they do 10 minutes about how, without the kindness of these strangers that they met on their trips, the trips wouldn't exist, they wouldn't happen. So that was brilliant. The first one we raised about 20 grand, and we picked up loads of sleeping bags and stuff, and I drove down to Calais, and the original plan was to be there just for the weekend, distribute all the stuff, feel good about myself and leave, but I ended up staying there for a year, and I ended up running the non-food item distribution, the NFI distribution for the camp. We restructured a lot of things in there, and just was a really rewarding place to be. Despite it being a horrific camp, as I'm going to talk about now, it was great to kind of be able to help in person, and make a difference every day. So yeah, this is a Calais refugee camp, and it's kind of this perfect storm. It's where all of these elements of neglect and politics and geography have all come together and made this kind of horrific place. The camp itself, the geography of the camp, is that it's 1 meter above sea level, so it's almost constantly wet and inundated with water. There's very few dry spots in it. It's been a camp there on and off for 50 odd years, just because of this. The reason people go to Calais is they want to come to the UK. It's not a French problem; it's a UK problem in France. So it's been a camp there historically. So there's a problem with historic waste and historic conditions. It's also the spill zone for the 2 chemical plants there. They're there in kind of cold northern European winters, and it's a former waste dump. So I mean, it's pretty poor, and it's also not recognised as a camp. So there's no formal, although at the beginning there were no formal structures in there or no formal interventions. I want to talk about that in politics, I think. So the local, national, and international politics problems that they had going on there, it was just everything kind of came through at once. There was a real kind of anti-immigrant wave after the terrorist attacks. Also, when you get 10,000 people, which is what the camp was in the end, you get 10,000 people in one place. I do have a lot of sympathy for the guys, the Calaisians, who have, it's quite a small town itself, and to have this additional burden of people walking through, trying to get to the train station or trying to get onto the trucks and the boats. Yeah, I have real sympathy for the truck drivers and the ferry security, and I mean, it's just a terrible situation for everyone. But yeah, it all kind of came together in this one point. We had recession and austerity policies, which had reduced the support for this and the access ways. Brexit obviously came in, and there was a kind of wave of anti-immigrant sentiment there again, and this growth of nationalism all across Europe, and that led to this buck passing going on. So France didn't recognise it as a camp, so none of the big NGOs could come in and help. The UK just kept it at arm's length. They didn't want that problem over in Kent, and the EU was facing this kind of Brexit and nationalism problem where they couldn't really find out a way of dealing with this. They were just in crisis mode. So yeah, like I said before, the large aid agencies weren't allowed to come in. So I mean, if Oxfam or the UN wanted to come in and set up a camp for 10,000, they could do it in a couple of weeks. But it was left to these medium-sized ones like ACTED. ACTED actually had to sue the French government in order to provide toilets and water at these camps. There was huge political opposition. The local politics there is Marie Le Pen. It's her area. She's the National Front leader for France. So it's a real kind of turf war there. And it left all of the kind of work being done by these small organisations like the one I work for, and it meant that there was huge inefficiencies, and it was uncoordinated, and there was these misplaced good intentions. You'd have people coming down, and they'd bring 10 sleeping bags and 10 tents, and they'd want to take them into the camp. And before we set up the system a bit better, they'd go into the camp, give it to the nearest people, and then when you went and try and distribute later, people would be like, why did you give the Sudanese these 10 sleeping bags and tents and not us? And that would cause tensions, and then there'd be fights in the camp. And it really took a few months to get things in order. But by the end, it was pretty good. And when they finally closed it down, it was a real relief for everyone. Like I say, it's a camp like no other. Normal refugee camps, you have maybe one or maybe two different groups of people in there, and there'd be one language or one culture, one religion or whatever. And this was a real mix of Afghans and Sudanese and Christian Eritreans and Syrians and whatever. So it was a real mix. And the big thing that we as the West lost was the information war. So the information from I speak French, and I read the French asylum seeking procedures, and I don't understand them at all. Still don't understand them now. They're very confusing. They're inconsistent. They changed. The UK one was the same. When we had some friends come over and trying to immigrate into the UK, they had to wait for years and missed that. And then because they didn't fill in this form, it was, I mean, it was really pernickety bureaucracy and whatever. Whereas the smugglers were absolutely clear. They were like, if you talk to the police, you'll be deported. If you talk to any authority, you'll be deported. If you talk to anyone that's not us, you'll be deported. So they ran these guys, they ran the camp, you know, they were throughout the whole camp. This is in Greece and in Calais, and they told people what to think and told people what to do. So people paid these smugglers thousands of pounds, and in the best case scenario, they were taken across to the UK, and the worst case scenario, they were kind of sold into working in agricultural gangs or in brothels or in nail bars and into modern slavery, which I think, Harriet and Jane, you can confirm there's a talk by the modern slavery guys coming up. They'll tell you that in a bit. They do phenomenal work. But yeah, that was the kind of missed opportunities to be a bit clearer and to take some power away from these smugglers. Yeah, I missed that one. And yet, like the camp, it worked. I mean, it was. I always say with Calais, like everything you read about it, all the bad stuff you read about it was true, and all the good stuff you read about it was true. It was a real, mixed mash community of people that are helping each other out. It brought volunteers from all across the world to come together in this completely kind of anarchic, unorganized system, but it worked. And then also equally, it was awful. And when it closed down, it was a real relief to everyone, I think. Cool, yeah. When I worked from Calais, I went to northern Greece, and they had a similar problem. It was the Epirus region in the north. Yeah, I think I've gone over on time. But yeah, northern Greece was also cool. Asked me some questions at the end. The current situation in both Greece and Calais is that COVID is making this even more difficult. And the kind of associated COVID recession that's going to come through will make it again even more a political problem of why are we helping these people and not our own. But there's some great people doing work down there. Calais, I think at the moment, is up to about 1,000 refugees, but they have the camp's no longer there, so they have to keep moving around. And I think the police have to evict them every 48 hours, so they take the tents down, put the tents in the bin, and people go and get the tents out of the bin and give them back in. But yeah, there's the Refugee Community Kitchen, who were just absolute rock stars down there, set up by a couple of guys who used to run a stage at Glastonbury, and they just provide thousands and thousands of like nutritious, delicious meals to refugees in Calais and in Grand Centre. And L'Auberge de Migrants were the ones that did the logistics with me. And also there's another one called Help Refugees, who also do good work down there. So there would be the three if you wanted to donate money or go and volunteer. I think Jane was saying that there's, she'll talk a bit later about the Amnesty thing, the 5 things you can do to help, or is that right, Jane? Nod. Shake your hand.
Yes, that's right. It's the I Welcome campaign that Amnesty runs, that if you go onto the website, but yeah, I can talk about that in a bit more detail.
Cool, yeah, talk to Jane about that. So yeah, that's briefly my cycling and refugee working highlights. If you've got any questions, I don't know how we're going to do this. Jane, was it hands up or was it? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've got any questions, thanks very much for that, Dan. That was really interesting to see all your pictures of your travels and hear your anecdotes and stuff. And it's great that you're travelling. It was what spurred you, I suppose, in a way, to go on and do your help at the refugee camps. So it's nice that your adventure travelling spurred you to do that, and you spent quite a lot of time there, didn't you, helping these people? And I think the interesting thing is at the point you made about actually meeting these people. I think what's so important is that these are individuals, these people, and they shouldn't be defined just by their status. They've all got personal stories to tell, and yeah, I've just seen somebody put in the chat saying de-otherizing them. It's very easy to do that, but if you've had personal connections with them, then it becomes impossible to do that. Then your compassion comes out, I think, more. So yeah, we're going to have some questions, and I think if people are happy to use the hand raised function, as I mentioned, if they've got any questions for Dan. And then, okay, so I can see at the moment that Philippa has got her hand up first. So we go to Philippa first. So remember to unmute yourself.
She's muted. So I just got a message from Harriet. Is that right? I've stopped sharing the screen. Is everything good?
Hold on a second.
Can Philippa unmute, or is that something we have to do for her?
I'm asking her to unmute. Maybe go to someone else first and we'll come back to Philippa.
Yeah, okay. Anybody? Just checking to see if I can see any other hands up.
Yvette's got her hand up.
Oh, right, okay. So let's go to Yvette then.
Hiya, thanks for that.
Hi,
It's
Yvette.
really interesting and really good photographs and really kind of animated little anecdotes and stuff. That's really interesting. For those of us who like traveling but don't do such kind of extreme traveling, or would be interested in volunteering or know people who might be, what would be the kind of what would be a kind of good starting point for a bit of traveling or a bit of volunteering, but not, you know, so extreme that it just becomes something that you think you could never do, sort of thing? What's a good starting point, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, charity starts at home. So if you were looking to volunteer, then there's lots of aid agencies that work with refugees that need help in East Anglia, in Stamford and wherever. I'm sure Jane and Harriet can point out some of those. I think, I mean, the Refugee Community Kitchen, they also do outreach in London. So if you connected with them, you could maybe do a London one and then go from there. I think there is a real danger of getting kind of drawn into voluntourism, where these ones where you kind of pay to go and help in different places. So I think you really have to be quite strict on what you think is the best use of your time and your money, and quite often it is just, I mean, unglamorously, it's just sending the money. Calais was kind of one of the examples there, where we had thousands of volunteers come down and they didn't do as much good as they could have if they had just sent the money. So yeah, it was a really interesting time. I mean, also I think with the Calais crisis, a lot of people there were so kind of affected by the refugee crisis and the war in Syria, and these images that were coming into our phones and our homes all the time, that they almost came to Calais to be helped rather than to help. You know, they just felt this need to go down there, and a lot of it was, yeah, I mean, they'd come to me and they'd say, oh, you know, we want to go and you know, teach in the camp or stuff like that, and I'd say, are you a teacher? And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, well, no, you're not going to do that. So I'd have to kind of make them come and sort socks with me or sort, you know, jumpers. So yeah, you've got if you've got a specific skill, then there'll always be needs for different things in different areas. There's always needs for teachers in the Greek islands. There's always needs for medical people or whatever. But if you are just another pair of boots on the ground, then it's just as good to be a pair of boots in the ground in the UK, sorting everything, fundraising, and then maybe sending that on later. So I don't know whether that answers your question or.
Yeah, thank you.
Just for information, actually, there's a project in Peterborough. It's called Surviving to Thriving, and this is a partnership project between the British Red Cross and the Refugee Council, this project supports refugees and asylum seekers who are aged 11 to 25 in Birmingham, Leeds and Peterborough. And these 11 to 25-year-olds specifically don't have parents or guardians in the UK, and it provides life skills and advice and mental health support to them, basically helping them to rebuild their lives and thrive in the UK. So that's called Surviving to Thriving, if anybody wants get involved locally. Okay, so I'm just looking for any more hands up. Taya,
Philippa.
is that the right pronunciation? I hope so. Yeah.
Hi, yes, my name is Tahia.
Tahia.
I'm Tahia, I'm from South Africa. I've actually studied with Dan and he's a very close friend. So I'm always excited to hear him talk about his adventures. I have two questions for Dan. The first question might be a bit, I mean, I'll see what you answer, but you did share a lot of very kind of funny moments with us. So I'd be really interested to know, at what point in your journey, or at any point in your journey, did you ever have like an aha moment, or like, did it ever stand out to you that this was the reason you were doing this? Because what you've done is something that even myself, as someone who specializes in migration, probably would never A, have the guts to do, and B, have the privilege to do. So that's my first question, an aha moment that you had. And my second question is, I look at your travels and it makes me so envious. And I want to know what your opinions would be on a woman trying to do this journey. And because obviously the reality is it is different and you've had a first-hand experience. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Talia, as always. Yeah, I mean, I have to, upfront acknowledge my massive amount of privilege in that I am a white British straight male, able-bodied guy. So this is something that is different for me to do than for other people to do. However, I think the aha moment, there wasn't an aha moment. It just kind of built over time, and you realize that all of the things that you thought before, I didn't know why I thought them. I knew that these people were like this, right? That's what I was told. If you're in the Middle East, you're like this, and if you're whatever. And then just from being there, I don't know, I don't remember a particular aha moment, but like a series of them being like, that's wrong, and I've misthought that, and I've really had to rethink things. On the can anyone do it? I mean, I'd love to be like, yep, it's easy for everyone, go for it. But there are, like you say, there are challenges. However, there's quite a few local to, not to you, Taylor, but to everyone else who's on the chat, I think, of examples of people who have done very similar things to me. I mean, Sarah Uten is from Stamford. She's cycled all through Russia and Canada and down through Japan, and she's rowed oceans, and she's done phenomenal things. And there's another lady called Helen Lloyd, whose Instagram is Helen Takes On, and she's gone pretty much everywhere I've gone, and she is a short, blonde, good-looking girl who, she cycled down the west coast of Africa, and then she bought a horse, and she rode the horse. I think she rode the horse to Timbuktu, and then she met this Swedish guy, and they bought a pirogue, like a wooden canoe, and they cycled the canoe down the Niger for a bit, and then she went through Congo and all the way down to Cape Town. She did like cycle through Siberia in the winter. I mean, absolutely amazing stuff. And the only kind of issue she had was in Morocco. She was taking a photo with a shepherd there, and he pinched her bum, so she punched him in the face. So I think we were actually talking about this yesterday with Harriet, but there are problems on these bike rides that women will face more than I will, but they face them also in Europe and at home and wherever. So I'm not, it's difficult for me to say anything on it, but I would say, the experience that Helen gets and that Sarah gets on her trips are much more intimate than mine. So with me, I turn up and I'm a sweaty, bearded weirdo, and they're like, you can camp over there, like in the distance. Whereas when Helen turns up, they're like, quick, come in, it's not safe, you got to stay with us. And she has to kind of escape the hospitality of every village that she goes through. So again, I don't think that's 2 for 2. I haven't answered any questions so far. So next question, Philippa.
Hey, can you hear me, Dan?
Yep.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, second time lucky. Lovely to hear your presentation. It was brilliant. 2 quick questions. One, we don't get that much coverage, I don't think, of the crisis in Greece. So I'd love to know how all the issues in northern Greece in terms of the refugee camps compare to Calais. And then just the second one, if I may, just more on the personal side, and following on from the last question, I suppose the purpose of all your adventure travels, and how has that changed as you've gone from 1 to 2 to 3? Was there something key that motivated you, and has that changed as time's gone on?
Right. How's Greece different to the rest of Europe, and how has my motivation changed? Greece was fascinating in that Greece is different to France in that they accepted aid. They said, we have a problem and we want aid to come in. So the UN could come in and Oxfam could come in and all these big aid agencies could come in, but that adds in a certain other layer of bureaucracy, so things get more slowly done. Greece also didn't want any big refugee camps. I mean, if you look on the news, it always looks terrible when there's massive refugee camps. But if they go in and they're set up properly, then it's quite easy to give water and school and medicines and vaccines when there's refugees in a large area. Whereas Greece decided to spread them all throughout the country. So I mean, in my area in Epirus, there was a couple of what would look like refugee camps, but then also there was some people staying in an abandoned music school in the mountains, and there was 20 over here and 30 over here, and like an abandoned hotel was used down by the coast. And so that actually doing the logistics from my job was having to go out to these places, travel for, I mean, Epirus is huge as well, travel for hours to deliver like some fair and equitable stuff. I think they also so it was completely different on that front. But by the time we left Greece, they were doing cash handouts. So instead of the UN buying, 2 pairs of boxers and 3 trousers and whatever and giving them as a thing, they gave cash instead on these cash cards. And then that helped in that they could spend them in the local economy, and it kind of really ingratiated them on those side of things. Greece was also different in that, Greece and Calais were the same in that no one wanted to be in Greece and Calais. People that were in Greece wanted to go to Germany and France and the UK, so they were all just waiting to move on. So it had very similar smuggler themes there. But yeah, Greece was interesting in that they had there was a time when they were deciding whether they should allow refugee children into the Greek education system, and the Greek education ministry were actually brilliant, and they said that a child in Greece was a child of Greece and would be educated, like nothing about it. And then there were these horrendous letters sent to horrendous newspapers of kind of really like 1950s US segregation style thing about needing separate toilets and needing diseases and things like that. But the Greek ministry stood strong, and I think they sued some of these newspapers, and one of the reporters got fired. There was something happened anyway. But in the end, by the time we left, the refugee children were being integrated. They were moving into Greek schools, and it worked out a lot better. Whereas in France, it was more transitory. Has my motivation changed over the trips? Yeah, the first trip was to impress girls in bars, and it didn't work. So the second one, no, the first one, I broke my knee playing rugby. And it was kind of a physio for that. And I thought, the whole way through the first one, I thought this was just a stupid thing to do. So I thought I'd get to Mont Blanc and I'd quit there, or I'd get to Istanbul and I'd quit there. And then I just found myself on the Syrian border, and I was just, I may as well keep going. I always said to myself on all the trips, like, there's no problem quitting. Like, no one is going to judge me. I go back and see my friends, and sorry guys, Philip is also another person that I studied with, an old school friend. So I'd go back and see my friends, and we'd hang out in the pub, and no one would care. So I always said that if I wanted to quit, I'd quit, but never on a bad day. So when it was raining and I'd hurt my knee, or I'd got a puncture, or the bike had broken, or struggling with a visa, or when it was bad, that's not the time to quit. But I always said if I'd stayed in a nice room, if I'd had a good night's sleep, if I'd had a full breakfast, and then I still wanted to quit, then I'd quit. And it just came to a stage where I just never really needed to quit. So the motivation for the second and the third one was having been in Syria and Sudan, and just kind of wanting to go and see some more, and yeah. Have I answered that? Yeah, let's leave it there.
Great, thanks,
More
Dan.
questions?
I think we've got a question from Annie Hall.
Yeah,
Hi, Annie.
I'm fascinated, Daniel. How did you fund your bike rides, and were you also self-funding at the refugee camp?
Yeah, so cycling is really very cheap. You are your own transport. I'm not a big fan of camping, so on the first trip I camped for about 14 days. On the second trip I didn't camp at all, and on the third trip I camped twice or something. But yeah, going through a lot of China, a lot of North Africa, Turkey, you can live off £2 or £3 a day, maybe £10 a day. I always budgeted £10 a day plus £100 per country for getting visas and stuff. So it was it's much cheaper to live on the road than it is to live in Stamford. For the price of a meal out or a couple of beers, you can travel hundreds of miles. And I'm fueled largely on kind of jelly babies and Maltesers, so I'm very cheap to run. Yeah, and in Calais initially, yeah, I'd gone down there. And actually, my plan was to cycle down the US and South America and try and make it so I'd been to every country. I'm about 30 short. But I went to Calais, and I just couldn't justify spending money on having an enjoyable bike ride when there was people in need. And a lot of the things when I got there, I'd saved up some money, so when I got there, it's always the least glamorous things that need the most amount of money. So we needed cardboard boxes and tape and pens and stuff like that, and it's very difficult it's unglamorous to ask people for stuff like that. If you're asking for clothes for babies or nappies or the more kind of glamorous items, easy to get funding. And I mean, when we were in sorry, come back to the question before. Calais and Greece were different in that Calais was largely men. I mean, it was about 10,000 at its maximum, and of that 10,000, it'd probably be about 9,000 men, about 800 women, and about 200 kids. That was the kind of breakdown. And yet, all of the stuff we got was women's or kids. I think partly because women have more clothes, and partly because men wear clothes until they fall off, so they don't have very much to donate. But yes, and then in Greece, it was kind of the second wave of migration, so that was very much 50-50. It was families and children and stuff, so the demographics were different. But yeah, that's my answer.
Great, thanks. Any more questions? Otherwise, I think we nearly got to. Frank Eagle. One last question then.
Great name.
Hello, it's Mark actually. We're sitting with Frank. Clearly, working in the camps must have been exceptionally difficult. What emotional support was there for volunteers like yourself, and was it effective support?
No, there was very little support at all. In Calais, there's nothing formal at all at the beginning, and that was terrible. And I mean, there was very little support for volunteers, and there was no support for the refugees at all in the camps. And I think that was highlighted as one of the major concerns. There were overdoses and people in real mental strife down there. On the volunteer front, yeah, I think because of the scale of the crisis that was going on, it was very difficult to get people to take any breaks. That was our main problem. And when we went towards Greece, once there's a structure in place that people have a bit of faith in, it's easier to say, right, I'm going to go take a week off and this will still be here when I come back. Whereas in Calais, it was really scrambling for every item of clothing, every whatever, and every night there could be a fire or something break out. Whereas Greece was a lot more stable. But I mean, giving mental health support to refugees is very difficult anyway, and that's mainly because of the horror they've been through, but also there's very few, speaking from Sudanese and Syrian and Afghans, there's very few counsellors that can counsel them in their language. So it was kind of a can of worms that we as the volunteers didn't really want to open. And there was a certain element of kind of the refugees being in the same boat together, so they had some kind of empathy with. So if you were having a bad day, then you know the person in the tent next to you understood the crap you've been through. So there was that level of kind of community support, but yeah, nothing formal, nothing structured, and nothing effective.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I think we're going to need to start wrapping up now, because otherwise we're going to be over time. I just wanted to mention that there's a book called The Kindness of Strangers, and Dan's featured in there, along with we've got it's a series of essays written by adventurers. So there's Benedict Allen, Ed Stafford, Sarah Ooten, Al Humphreys, and several others, and it's their stories about that. They're all done adventure travels, and it's their stories of the kindness of strangers that they came across in their travels.
Their stories are good, but mine's the main one.
It's a great book, and donations for every purchase go to Oxfam and their work with refugees. Recommend that. It's a really nice read. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that I referred earlier to the I Welcome campaign from Amnesty. If you look that up, Amnesty I Welcome campaign, it's basically got lots of information about how individuals, what they can do to personally help refugees and make them feel more welcome. And it's got, it can be as small as adding your name to a petition, which is taking action locally, putting pressure on the Prime Minister or your local MP. It might be something like donating goods that can be taken out to help refugees or help them furnish somewhere where they're living if they've come over with absolutely nothing. There's lots of organisations that Amnesty are also working with. So Refugees at Home, which is a charity where you can offer a safe space to a refugee, perhaps if you've got a spare room in your house, for example, or you could perhaps refer a refugee to them to help them, or you can volunteer to help them. If you've got any legal experience or whatever, that you could help people, or you might help them to learn the language, or give them some career advice. So it's a really good campaign, so I recommend you have a look at that. And the Refugees at Home is good. And there's also, they've linked up with what's called the Family Together campaign. I think probably quite a lot of us are aware that there's lots of rules at the moment preventing refugee families coming together. And the Families Together campaign is working to put pressure on the government to allow refugee families to be together. And that's obviously really important in terms of it being a basic human right that families can be together. So have a look at that as well. That's the Family Together's campaign. And just flag up to you that the two organisations that Dan mentioned, the Refugee Community Kitchen, they serve hot, nourishing meals to people in the UK, in London and Edinburgh, and in northern France. And Dan also mentioned the Auberge de Migrants, which works in Calais and northern France, and they provide material assistance and food aid for refugees there, and they're still working there. The camps are still there. They're all broken up. It's not the big camp anymore, but the refugees are still there in a very vulnerable situation, or the asylum seekers. So we're going to be sending an email out to everybody that's attended, there'll be information on there telling you about some of these organisations and providing you with the links as well. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that's come along. There's been some great questions as well. Thanks, Dan, very much for joining us this afternoon and sharing your experiences, both of adventure and helping refugees. It's been really interesting. So thanks for that, Dan. And just wanted, and help. Thanks to Harriet as well for her helpful background assistance, Harriet, on the tech side. That's been great. I just wanted to very quickly let you know that our festival carries on next week. We've got the Cambridge Peace and Education Research Group have got an event on Monday evening at 8 o'clock. We've got a talk on the US death penalty, race and criminal justice on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And on Thursday the 27th at 7:30, we've got Hope for Justice, talking about modern day slavery hidden in plain sight, helping us to spot what signs there might be of slavery around us. And it is very much, it is unfortunately very, very prevalent. And there are some other events, and all of the details of these you can find on the Stamford Arts Centre website. Look out for the FOSJ events, and they're all listed there, and they're all free, and it would be lovely to have you join us again. But also let your friends and contacts know, that'd be great. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, yes I did, that there's this has been recorded, and we have a YouTube channel, a festival YouTube channel, where this will be uploaded, so you can share it with others if you'd like. And there've been some wonderful events taking place around the Central England region, so do take a look at that. And there's lots of other interesting talks and campaigns that have gone on over the month that I talked about. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your contributions and your questions, and your supportive comments in the chat as well. And we really hope that you'll join us at another of our festival events. So thanks very much. Wish you a very good evening. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.